Welcome to Leadership Reimagined. I'm your host, Cassie Crosby. With me today is Krystal Hicks, founder of JobTalk, a recent New Hampshire 40 under 40 honoree, and a career strategist who's known for telling it like it is. I've had a lot of people ask me recently about changing careers and about what's going on in the market. So when I thought about who would be available to give us the real scoop on today's job market, I thought of Krystal immediately. So welcome, Krystal. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Excited
Yeah,
to be here.
absolutely. I want to start, as I always do, with talking a little bit about your journey. So what led you to specialize in career strategy? And then what was the catalyst for you founding JobTalk?
Sure. I fell backwards into this space, I think, like many people do. So I always kind of say jobs are my job, but it's been that way for about 17 years. But I got out of college in 2007. Recession was on the heels. Most of
Yeah.
my friends were having to move back home. Thank God for bartending, right? And then I fell backwards into a staffing agency and they hired me internally. And so I got really an up close kind of look at the employment sector, which nobody had ever talked to me about. No one ever talked to me about HR recruiting. So I really was super fascinated around why people were hiring the people that they were. They might call us at the agency and say, we need someone with these things, but then they'd wind up hiring somebody that didn't have a lot of those things. And that was really fascinating to me. So I kind of transitioned out of staffing into career services because I really wanted to impart that knowledge and advice on the upcoming generation. And so I worked at a few different colleges, including UNH. I ran career services there for several years, worked in the prison system doing pre-release employment counseling one morning a week
Yeah,
for
very
like 3
cool.
years, which was interesting. And then transitioned into corporate recruitment. So when I was there, I was at Lindt Chocolate. Everyone knows kind of Lindt Chocolate, the truffles. Their US headquarters is right in Stratham, New Hampshire. And so I went in to be their corporate recruitment manager, and it was so exciting and it was a great company, but probably, I don't know, a year or two in, I just started getting that itch where I really missed the career counseling aspect. I just kind of knew that I wanted to own my own practice someday. And it was kind of always like the retirement, you know how it goes. I'm like, oh, someday when we retire, right? You actually did retire from the
Yeah.
military and then do it. But I was
Yeah.
thinking like, when I'm like 60, this will be the job, and I really missed it. And so I gave my boss, my VP of HR, like a 12-month notice and just said, I'd really love your support. I want to do this. And I'm a planner, right? So behind the scenes, I'm just building all the infrastructure for the business. And it was great. And then in April of 2019, I left corporate officially and made Job Talk my full-time thing. And so now I see about 400 clients a year across all functions, coast to coast, every industry, every level. And it's been really amazing. I'm super grateful. I always kind of say, like, I have a 6-year-old, right? Like, my business is in first grade and it feels really good to just have a well-oiled machine now.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the journey of it. I think I kind of hung up my corporate recruitment hat. I still love all things corporate recruitment. It's a big thing that I'm obviously coaching my clients on and stuff. For me, it was like I just wanted to get back to being on the side of the candidate and not being in this position where I was placing people, which is much more of an agency sort of contract recruitment style.
Yeah.
So career strategy for me, people always kind of say like, oh, why career strategist? Why not career counselor or job coach? And I'm like, because it's a little bit of job therapy intersected with complete strategic planning for your career. And I try
Yeah.
to make everything very actionable for people. So for me, it's really about mobilizing someone's plan, not just talking about the plan or counseling someone through a tough situation at work or how to navigate a promotion conversation. That's a part of it. But most of the people I'm working with, they are actively in their job hunt and we are strategically navigating through, sticky situations or helping them overcome bigger transitions or whatever it is. So yeah, I love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Who knew?
Yeah, and you're like actively helping people through that process. But what I love about you, Krystal, is you have this company and you're helping people, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff you're doing too, and you're leading in really big ways. Can you just quickly, just for background
Sure.
on you, like what other ways are you out there? Can you just share some of that with people?
Sure. So, I mean, even with Job Talk, so I'd say 80% of my time I'm spending with job seekers one-on-one. And then the other 20% I'm doing public speaking, corporate workshops, kind of going on site. I have a couple, I'd say corporate clients. Some of them are nonprofit, some of them are for profit, but really just helping people build more equity into their hiring process, helping them streamline their hiring process, helping them improve their employer brand, sort of like the why behind, why should people even want to come work here? And then outside of Job Talk, for the last 6 years, I've actually been teaching at UNH at the business school. I teach a college to career, how to stand out in today's job market. So
Love
like we
that.
were just saying, all my seniors right now getting ready to graduate in a few months are starting to sweat. So that's really fun. And then 2 years ago, I co-founded the 100 Women Who Care Seacoast chapter. So that's been amazing. And we basically, in a nutshell, we give away, $10,000 to $12,000 a quarter to a local nonprofit that's voted on by our members. And so we've given away over $90,000 since starting, which has been so awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm a proud member.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that too. I tell
I
people all the
love
time,
it.
like
I
100
love
Women
it.
was like the thing that I didn't know I needed,
I
like
know.
Job Talk was the firstborn. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it's the baby. But man, that outreach and the community work is so amazing. And I love
Oh,
learning
yeah.
about nonprofits that are right in our backyard that I've never even heard of. So it's
Yeah.
been great.
That's a powerful concept. So I've known you for a while now, and you're someone who I've always thought of as, you're going to tell it like it is. So from your perspective, what's the hard truth about today's job market that most, coaches and HR professionals just aren't willing to tell people?
That's such a good question. I think I always kind of say like the market keeps us honest, right? So there have been several times in the past few years where there's been whisperings of a recession and we didn't really get there, which was nice. And now I kind of feel like we're kind of teetering on that edge and we're probably going to slip into a bit of a recession, unfortunately. And I think that's not to fearmonger or anything like that. It's just the nature of where we are. And so, unfortunately, what's really unique about this upcoming, we'll call it recession versus maybe something that we experienced in 2008, think of the post-COVID job market. Right? It feels like it's been a million years, but it's only been, 5 years really, or like 3 years since we've really been out of it. Something that was really remarkable that happened that I think impacts the market now and is a big, big challenge for people is we implemented the remote work option that a lot of people never had before, which I loved. And I remember having to fight for a work from home day when I was in corporate, like, I just need to focus, like, I just need a day.
Yeah.
And it always felt like such a privilege, it was like, oh, well, we'll give you a work from home day. And so now we've really seen that become part of the fabric of the conversation of just how we feel about the work that we do, right? It very much changes if we have to make that 90-minute commute into work, 4 days a week or something like that. I mean, these are things that make really, unfortunately, really huge impacts on people's quality of life. If you're a candidate, for example, job hunting right now, looking for something that's 100% remote, that is a national talent pool. So you're talking 1,000 applicants a day, and that's not hyperbolic. That is like what I hear from my friends that are in corporate recruitment for fully remote companies working on these roles. And so the saturation, the volume that candidates have to swim through to just get a call is crazy.
It's like the housing market was 2 years ago.
Great example. Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't make an all cash offer. You are not going to stand out here. So the challenge, when we think about post-COVID, right, in 2021 alone, 47 million people quit their job. And 50% of those 47 million completely transitioned into different functions in different industries. And so people did all of this incredible introspection during that time and was like, I don't really love what I do. I don't love this company. This isn't serving me. I don't want to go back into the office 5 days a week. The quality of life I've been able to gain, the time with my family I've been able to gain from having this hybrid schedule or remote schedule, I don't want to give that up. And so what happened was we became this market that had data that reflected a very low unemployment rate, right? For all intents and purposes, we still have very low unemployment, 4.1. I think New Hampshire, we're like 3. So, it's like very low unemployment. But the thing that we don't have the data on that affects what's going on right now that people are feeling in their job search is the saturation of confidential searchers. So out of the 400 clients I work with a year, majority of them are working and they've got their head on a swivel. They're preparing to make a jump and they're applying. And so what happens is if you are unemployed in this market right now, it's like a double whammy. Not only is there a ton of saturation and competition, but it's employed competition, which everybody will tell you, right? Everyone in recruiting will tell you if you're employed, you just have a different kind of a bargaining chip. It's a different type of conversation. But I think that is something that people are feeling right now. And what I'm always trying to encourage my corporate clients to do is to really go after people that are unemployed. And I tell them, I'm like, listen, it's a more cost-effective recruitment strategy for you. You're also not going to wind up in a bidding war with somebody's current company, right? If they're just trying to leverage someone for a counter, but it's tough. And so I tell people all the time, your job is not to click the apply button. Your job is starting after you click the apply button. Like that, the job search begins after you apply. It is following up. It is trying to find someone to refer you, getting just one person to kick your name in the right direction can make a huge difference. It's not just about who you know, it's about who knows you and how they feel about what they know about you. And having those people proactively think about you when they know they're going to have a position open on their team and they reach out, So I tell people right now, you got to be warming up your network. Don't have the first time you reach out to someone in 5 years be because you're asking them for a favor because you lost your job and you need a referral. It's like, so that's a very big answer to your question, but the market is very tough right now because we have this saturation and then we have this mass exodus out of the federal sector now into the private sector, which is then duplicating the issue. That's a whole other thing. And I'm sure you see that with plenty of the people that you work with too.
Definitely.
It's like so painful. So it's really tough. The volume is a huge part of it. And I tell people all the time, listen, I'm sure you're applying to jobs that you are a great fit for, and you probably won't get a call. And so it's a volume game, unfortunately. Don't put all your emotional eggs into one job at a time.
Yeah.
You got to diversify. You got to start applying to as many things as possible that make sense for you. But it is a huge lift for some people to spend that much time on their job search when maybe they're already working or they're trying to transition and they're like, how do I stand out in this new field I've never worked in before? So that tends to be when I start hearing from people, and like why people reach out to me, but it's really hard right now.
There's been a couple times recently where people have related the current environment to COVID, and it doesn't give me a lot of peace when I hear that. I'm like, no, I don't want to be in that place. But I do know a lot of people who either lost their job or considering leaving their job, either for a buyout, which is happening both at the federal government, but it's also happening in the nonprofit sector. It's happening in the corporate sector. It's very common right now. Or people who are sitting in this place of, am I going to lose my job? Because that's the other piece, is that we're seeing federal government cuts and also corporate cuts. It's tough.
I tell people to pack the parachute. Like, we got to pack a parachute. We got to get the resume updated. We got to warm up the network, maybe start registering with some staffing agencies proactively. If you're looking for you might as well have other people looking for you too. And packing that parachute is just so important because we might find out abruptly that we got to jump out of that plane. Or maybe the plane's going down and we didn't realize that we were attached to a rift that's coming or a layoff or something. You got to be ready to jump out and have all of your faculties with you and be ready to go, because you can't waste 2 or 3 weeks unemployed getting your resume updated and doing all this stuff. I mean, on average, it's 4 weeks to hear back from a submitted application right now. Most of my clients are aggressively job hunting, and it's a 4 to 6 month process. Like almost every call, they'll say, I'm not used to not getting calls when I job hunt. Like, they've stayed in their space. They've got really good experience. They've got tenure where they were. They've got good brand cachet for the companies on their resume. And they're like, what is going on out there? Like, the last time I was job hunting, call it 6 years ago, probably pre-COVID, right? I would send out a couple resumes. I'd get a couple phone calls, have a couple interviews. There we go. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this market. And that's everybody. So the frustration is palpable.
But it also seems like I'm hearing a lot from companies and hiring managers just about the same thing on the other side, which is that, like, they have people apply and then they reach out to bring them in for an interview and they get ghosted. And so I think there's some challenges on both sides of the market, both for hirers and for job seekers.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the employee-employer relationship is in a toxic place right now. The employee-employer relationship has shifted so drastically from the days of the company had all of the power. The employee was at the beck and call of what the company wanted them to do. And then we had like 2016, 2017, 2018, where things completely shifted. And it was like, invest in your employer brand. Why should people want to come work for you? And then COVID hits. And now COVID is like the shaking up of the snow globe. Even when the shaking stopped, it took a long time for stuff to settle. And that's why we saw such drastic layoffs last year, specifically, or like end of 2023, was because all of the right sizing of the
Mhm.
teams was finally able to happen because that stuff had settled. And so now what we're seeing is I see a little bit more budget stability with the companies I talk to. There's not as many like deep cuts unless they are, I mean, because interest rates are the way that they are, if they're connected to certain markets, right? Private equity,
Yeah.
unfortunately, is just running through some of these sectors and just gobbling
Yeah.
up all these companies and then dismantling them.
Tech is
Um,
still in a rough place.
it's
Yeah.
really, yeah, if you think back, I mean, tech was where it was at. People were
I
like, how do I get
know.
into tech? How do I
I
make money and get into
know.
tech? And
Like
it's like,
killer salaries
oh my
and
God.
yes.
And now it's like they're the most cutthroat. Unfortunately, I think they've done the most damage to the brands of the employer side, because when I remember back when we saw layoffs and there were people not giving out severances, or the whole thing that we saw early in 2024 where people were like, all right, return to office 5 days a week. And it's like, that's just passive aggressive layoffs,
Mhm.
because you're basically saying if you don't come back 5 days a week, we're going to cut you. But those are people that deserve severances. Those are people that have worked there,
Right.
that you shouldn't be like cornering them and making them make the decision. It's like you're giving people a lose-lose
Yeah.
situation. So there's no trust between the employee and the employer side anymore. Two, three
Hmm.
rounds with a company and then never heard back from them. And the companies
Yeah.
don't like it when that happens to them. And it's not, I'm not someone that's big on like the retribution side of it, like, oh, they deserve that. But I think that there are things that, especially as coming as a previous corporate recruiter, you're building a rapport with people. Like, you're building trust and credibility with people from the very first communication point. It could be
Yeah.
the way that they got a text message from you after they applied, just being like, hey, I know the process can be really crazy, but we always have a human here that's ready to chat with you if you got questions. Like, I've seen companies do it really, really well, and they don't have these issues with ghosting. So I
Yeah.
think it's tough. And I think a lot of people are dealing with the AI chat Q&A bots that companies have set up. So it's like, a
Mhm.
question on your application, send this question in, and it's like an AI bot and they know it. So then all of a sudden
Right.
you're training people to ignore this bot when they want to. And then the recruiter is calling them and saying, hey, we got to set up an interview. And there's just not the same sense of urgency. So it's like, I don't know. I think that there's an interesting sort of battle going on between the candidate and the employer side of like this right and wrong. It's this tug of war, because the power dynamic was always very clear cut until it wasn't. And
Yeah.
now people are just sort of struggling to, again, candidates are struggling to get that first round phone call. But then what happens is as soon as that offer is extended, the power dynamic shifts. The candidate then has the power, and the candidate's got three other companies they're talking to. So now everything that you made that candidate question, feel, take into consideration through that whole interview process could come back to bite you.
Hmm.
And they go and they dip and they take the other offer. And so it's
Yeah.
like, then you're starting all over again as a company. So it's a really messy dance that we're in right now. And I don't know if I see it settling anytime this year. I think it's not typically a fast, or COVID's different. That was like an overnight global, like, life is changing. But typically this stuff is much more slow to
Yeah.
change.
And it's almost like people are taking back their agency in many ways. And I had clients who were working with this return to office, like we're bringing people back to the office, but we got rid of all of our office space. So now I'm working in a broom closet with no
Let's say no
window,
desk, no
no,
parking spot.
right? Like, yeah, like there's no parking, or they're hot, they're hot seating desks. And
Yep.
if you're not on at midnight to get into the queue, you can't get a desk or you can't get a parking spot.
Miserable.
And yeah, it's miserable. And so I have known some people who left their companies either through a buyout or just left altogether because they, didn't feel they were treated right. But you talk to a lot of job seekers. You obviously talk to a lot of people who are thinking about leaving their jobs. So, other than some of those like really sticky things, what are some of the other big reasons that you see people are wanting to leave their job or are leaving their jobs?
That's a great question. And I think my perspective is kind of hard coded from the fact that, like, I'm talking to a lot of people. I'm not an HR doing an exit interview. I'm getting the real
Right.
reasons why people are
Yeah.
leaving.
Yeah.
I'm getting the unfiltered, unabridged version of why they
Right.
wanted to leave this company. And I have so many clients that tell me, yeah, I just told them that I was taking this other position because I needed more money. I didn't even want to get into it with them because I was
Mm,
so annoyed and I just wanted out. And it had been such a toxic situation and I didn't want them trying to keep me. And like, I hear that
yeah.
stuff. As much as I hear, yeah, I just don't feel super appreciated. I have been burning it at both ends. Our company has been in total chaos and turmoil for the last 18 months, and I've been like holding the wheels on the bus. And like,
Yeah.
I just don't even feel like my efforts have been recognized. And I think that is a massive part of the conversation. And this is a big part of, when people talk about retention, because I say in this market, to retain people is so much more cost effective than to recruit people.
Totally.
So, like, the more you can hang on to the good people you have, the better shape you're in. But a big part of that retention is just ensuring that you have engaged leadership and
Yeah.
transparency, and with all of the distrust that is, I mean, think about it. My God, whether you're applying it to politics or not, the misinformation stuff that people are now so used to, nobody trusts anybody anymore. So
Totally.
when you have an employee that's like, I don't believe what this company is saying. Also, how many companies are out there saying, oh yeah, things are great, and then the next day they're cutting everybody? It's like when the
Yes.
trust goes out the window, people are not going to be quick to want to go above and beyond. They're not going to feel that sense of commitment to the organization because they're just wondering, well, when's my time? And so that starts to play into what we start to see as far as why people are making these shifts, why people are transitioning completely out of their organizations. They're like, yeah, I could probably find something else internal off of this team with this terrible manager. I just don't even want to be at this company because I'm annoyed that they even made that manager a manager. And I tell everybody, like, you have to remember who we're talking about. I mean, millennials, like, we are the largest segment of the workforce. I think by 2030, it's estimated to be 75% of the workforce will be millennials.
Wow.
Think of our work-life relationship. Think of how we grew up,
Yeah.
especially, like I said, I was coming out of college 2007, 2008. I saw so many people I knew, their parents were losing their homes. Just
Mhm.
don't have the same admiration and adoration for our companies and our employers that previous generations had. And so companies
Yeah.
have to start changing the relationship that they have with their people. And if you don't have self-aware leaders that can hold up that heavy mirror and be humble and take tough feedback from people and stop centering their own comfort in order to drive real change with their people, if you don't have leadership like that,
Yeah.
you're going to have a revolving door. It's just the way it is. Even if I know plenty of people that are like, yeah, I make great money. I'd make less to have a better leader. I'd make less to have
Yeah.
a better schedule or more
Totally. Just
flexible.
spoke to someone today who mentioned someone else getting promoted over them, and that disconnect between the values the company espouses and the ones they actually live by.
Yep.
And I think there's more and more tolerance for some of the less desirable leadership practices today than there were 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think there's a lot that people aren't willing to put up with anymore. It's all about the core of modern leadership, right? And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I have this discussion with this crowd about that people really kind of, it resonated. I said, listen, great leaders do not have to understand something for them to respect it and embrace it. And you can apply that to different learning styles. You can apply that to diversity. You can apply that to the way that their high performers get things done versus the way they personally get things done. I think
Mhm.
so much of this old school leadership style is like being the cookie cutter. I want these cookie cutter, I want to lead people that resemble me. It's like this mirror
Yes.
bias, and it's
Mhm.
like, oh my God, like the second
Yeah.
you don't embrace or respect something about me that could be personal, that could be my sexual identity, it could be
Yeah.
it could be the fact that 20% of our population manages some kind of neurodiversity and just processes information differently. Like 1 in 5 of your employees potentially could be. If you
Totally.
don't get something and therefore you're bungling your way through it and you're not really seeing people and like encouraging them to build trust with you so that they open up to you, you're going to lose people. Like they just
Yeah.
don't have the tolerance for it anymore. I mean, look at what's going on right now with like Target and, Costco
Totally.
because of the DEI measures. It's like people know how to vote with their dollars. They
Yeah.
do the same thing with their jobs.
Yeah, that's why I've been a little bit horrified when I see companies and federal government entities getting rid of unconscious bias training. I just don't think you can understate the value of people understanding themselves, the way their brain works, the neuroscience behind how we think and why biases even occur, where those mental models come from. I agree with you. I think that leaders really have to understand their own limitations and their own biases,
Mhm.
because the best leaders can lead anyone, not just people that look and act like them.
No, totally. Great leadership doesn't have to be perfect for it to be great.
Absolutely.
Imperfect
Right.
leaders are the most relatable ones to their
Yeah.
people, but own take accountability when you mess up and share that lesson and
Yeah.
lead from a place of humility. I mean, look at what happens when people are leading from a place of ego. The BBC came out with this great article probably less than a year ago where all of the data that we've collected post COVID about hybrid work models. This
Mhm.
article was like, hybrid is profitable. It
Yes.
is the most profitable structure. And yet
Hmm.
you have companies like the JP Morgans of the world that are like, nope, come on back in 5 days a week. And it's like, so what we're telling our people is that we're not making data-driven decisions anymore. We're
Right.
making ego-driven decisions. Like,
Right.
how do you expect people to feel about that? It's just
Yeah.
it's a real conundrum. And I empathize for companies that have signed these big commercial building leases. And I know that that's a part
Totally.
of it. And I get it. But at the same time, like, if you are telling people you're only a good employee to me if I can physically see you in the office 5 days a week, like that
Mhm.
in-person bias that's now created. Now, those are the people that are getting the promotions. We're disenfranchising a huge number of people that are probably rock star producers that are totally performing,
Yeah.
but like maybe they have a kid with special needs that they got to be close by to, and the hybrid schedule or the remote schedule just works better for them.
Mhm.
That's where like the resentment I think that builds in
Totally.
people. It feels personal to people. This is why I
Hmm.
always tell my corporate clients, we cannot treat remote schedules like a privilege. Either this
Right.
role, not the people, this role can be fully remote or not.
Yeah. I think it's the tension between being a good worker and being a good human and
Oh
having a
God,
life.
totally.
It's just interesting though, is like, how did I get it and exceeds expectations last year when I worked from home? And now this year you're telling me that I'm not even good enough to work here if I'm not in the office. Presenteeism, I think that's the term, is actually really counterproductive. I've seen leaders who dictated when people had to be at work. You have to be here from 9 to 5, and these are your core hours. And the people who fell under core hours actually work less hard than the people who had
Yeah.
flexibility, because they're like, well, screw it. If I have to be here anyway, I'm just going to sit at my desk and I'll do a little bit of work, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
work as hard. Whereas people who have free will and the ability to decide actually make better decisions about their time.
Yeah, 100%. And that, like I
Yeah.
said before, when I was in corporate, I was so appreciative when my VP
Yeah.
allowed me to work from home 1 day a week because as a recruiter, I had to source, I'm sourcing candidates, I'm doing phone screens, all the flybys when I'm in the office, the people coming by my cube that I love. I love my
Right.
coworkers. I want to see them, but it's like I am getting a fraction of my
Yes.
work done when I'm in office.
Yeah.
And people know this stuff though. So this is like where I think the frustration comes in is when companies act like they don't know this stuff
Hmm.
and they're still making these decisions. I had a great conversation with a CEO of a big national painting company, and he was really great. And I had done a podcast interview and said something about how this mandate to come back into the office is very ego centered and ego driven. And he was like, I had to eat some humble pie when I was listening to your episode because I just dumped $1 million into this building renovation before COVID. And yes, I want people to come play in my sandbox with my toys. And I
Yeah.
really had to sit with that and ask myself, like, but is this the best thing for the business? Because your people are your biggest asset. So I think that we're
Yeah.
continuing to see the shakeout of companies that are figuring things out. I'm happy to see many really cool, super progressive brands, like popular brands like Olipop, and like they're
Yeah.
fully remote teams and they're doing awesome. I think that we're going to continue to see more and more of that. People are always like, oh, I know everybody's bringing people back into the office 5 days a week. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like you hear about some of the big ones in the papers, but like
Yeah.
there's plenty of fully remote organizations out there still. So if that's something that
Hmm.
someone really needs, I encourage them to continue to look for that stuff. It's a more
Yeah.
competitive candidate base. It's a
Of
lot
course.
of people to stand out
Yeah.
from.
Everybody wants a remote job.
Yeah.
Like,
Not
yeah.
Gen Z. They don't want it. They want
Oh,
to go
yeah.
in. That's the funniest part. I go, give it a
Yeah.
couple years.
Like the commute and the return to office. Like I've just seen such an outsized impact on women and on moms. And I won't even get into how the burden for childcare is still totally, often
Yeah.
placed on moms. But what I think employers don't realize is that the feeling of having to commute an hour and a half or 2 hours and then to have your kid in daycare, all of that extra time, or to pay for
Mhm.
somebody to be watching your kid during all of that extra time, that's just like so unnecessary, and it's such a
Yeah.
burden just on the whole family. And when you work from home, it's like pop my kid to daycare, get home, get on the computer. I can work during that extra time that I would have been in a car where I can't do anything or on a train.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just so many reasons why it's more productive for
Yep.
everybody. Now, I'm not saying that there's not an argument to be made for certain industries and positions to be in the office, or that there's
Hmm.
not times. Of course, being in person, I think, is essential for building some of those connections. So having touch points is important,
Hmm.
but dictating when and how that happens, I think long term, it's just not going to work out well for companies. And this is the tension in any big change, right? Is where you have
Yeah.
like 10% of the people that are up front making the change, and then you have the people in the middle who are, kind of getting
Holding
on
on.
board, trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. And then you always have people in the back who are like never going to change. And those people will eventually
Yeah.
age out of the market, retire from the
Yeah.
market or what have you.
A phrase that I kind of throw out there all the time is like managerial Darwinism. If you were
Mm,
a people manager, especially, this one size fits all leadership style or managing all your people the
yeah.
same way, because this is how we've always done it. It's like it's adapt or die.
Yeah.
Like the
Right.
Darwinism is real here. Like if
Yeah.
you have to learn how to adapt with this stuff. And I think
Totally.
we've asked a lot of people, I think that, innovation is an amazing thing, but to your point, like it comes with growing pain. And so
Mhm.
that change management has to be something that's prioritized by organizations, or you're going to have that
Absolutely.
10 or 15% on the tail end that are just like so stretched beyond their means to learn these new things
Hmm.
quickly. And then let's say that they're people managers. Really fascinating insights. I was at a conference in London 2 years ago, and it's the future of work. It was
Mm.
super interesting. And all of these different folks from all of these major companies were like up on this panel. And one of the things that we found out across country, there's probably like, I don't know, 20 people from the States there, as mostly Europeans, but they had the same challenges that we had. And they said the unexpected bruise that's developing from all of this is the fact that our succession planning is tanking, because what's
Mm.
happened is the middle managers are so stressed and stretched so thin that their people below them are looking up and being like, I don't want their job. Don't
Oh,
tout me
yeah.
as your successor. Like, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
have your life. You look like hell. Like, have you slept
Yeah.
all week? I don't want that life. And so
Yeah.
what's happening is it's creating very real gaps in people's
Yeah.
structures. And that's going to cause them to have to go to market for a mid-level player or senior level player that's way more expensive. And so companies
Yeah.
were really trying to figure out, like, how do we help people get on the bus and get the tools they need and develop our people managers. And like, we have to make sure that we're not like they're about to break, you know what I mean? And the
I
number
do.
of short-term disability claims and mental health breaks that people have
Yes.
had to take at that level is like nothing to balk at. That's a
Hmm.
real thing, So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see. And I think companies have to be very intentional about how they try to solve this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And we've talked a lot about the challenges in the market, but I also want to talk about the opportunities. And so I'm curious, what are the biggest opportunities you're seeing for people considering a career change today?
I think that remote and hybrid options are definitely out there. And those have been life changing for some people. I hear from people all the time, like, this is the most work life balance I've ever had. I never thought I'd be able to work fully remotely. I think because people have so many tools and resources at their fingertips that they can upskill so much easier than ever before. If you think about it, back in the day, you had to enroll in a college, take a certification course, do all these things. We have LinkedIn Learning now. I mean, shit, you can
Yeah.
YouTube your way to becoming like, enough to be
Yeah.
dangerous as far as like Excel or Tableau or whatever the system is. So people are self-advocating and I think empowering themselves and upskilling themselves in their own time, preparing for these transitions. And so
Yeah.
they're happening in a way where I think it's a real testament to the people that don't just let work happen to them and let things happen.
Mm.
The people that like jump in the driver's seat and they're like, nope, I am seeing the writing on the wall. I've always thought about getting into project management. I'm going to go take my CAPM exam or my PMP certification. Like, I'm going to make this happen. Or people that say, oh, you know what? Like, I'm going to invest in, I've always been an analyst, but maybe I don't want to be on this IT structure anymore. I want to move into an HR analyst role. And I think companies are doing a much better job of career pathing and having these rotational options and even returnships, like organizations like pathforward.org, which I love for like stay-at-home moms, or people that even men that like stayed home to care for an aging parent. We are that sandwich generation. So starting to see a lot more of like the parents having to get put into a home and like things like that. You have these people that step away from their career for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And you've got these organizations like Path Forward that are out there bridging partnerships with companies and doing these returnship programs and pulling these people back into mid-level positions, right? So I think that there's so many more resources out there that people have to take advantage of. And that I think is the biggest opportunity. And I think it's a missed opportunity for people that are not trying to like upskill. And that would go, I think, especially for the industries that are more impacted by innovation, like marketing. Sometimes I have folks in my practice that are like, oh, let's say they're in HR or they're in the legal field. And they're like, I'm just worried about being seen as too old. I'm like, you couldn't be in a better function. HR and legal, I want to hire the person that's been there, done that. It's marketing. It's all of these communications platforms that I think really stress people out that have been in the game for a minute. And then they see a layoff or a riff coming and they're like, oh my God, if I have to hit the market right now, how am I going to compete with these kids that can like do this stuff like the digital native generation? I'm like, don't wait. You can let something happen to you, or we can try to pack that parachute now and like prepare for, the uncomfortable but maybe inevitable situation where we're jumping out of that plane.
So I'm curious, if you're a leader or an organization thinking about talent management, what's one strategy that you've seen that they could prioritize to effectively manage and retain top talent?
I mean, again, just going back to the data around the number one reason why people even leave opportunities in the first place is just that lack of recognition, lack of appreciation. This is about recognizing people's efforts. And I think a lot of times I see organizations that put all of their time, energy, budget into their rock stars or into their strugglers. And so that worker bee midsection gets really overlooked. And yet those are the people that are just crushing it productivity wise typically. And like they're your steady eddies, and I think those are the people like your rock stars, right? Those are the people that we're going to probably promote succession planning. They're tapped for their next thing, right?
Yep.
But those people that are just the consistent players that are like, I'm happy, I'm not chasing the promotions, let me do my job, pay me a decent wage. I think those are the people that we want to really be focusing on. And I think that those are also the people that tend to have the most tenure, ironically. That is where that hub of insight for leadership really lies. So like really sitting down with those core people and being like, doing like a stay interview, like what's kept you? Like you're such a rock star. God, we appreciate your contribution so much. Like, do we in the ways that we try to show you we appreciate you? I bring this up and I do a lot of workshops with this in corporate because it's like if you've heard of like the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman, he wrote a second book with Paul White called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. The thing that's always so funny to me is like if you take gifts, like tokens of affection or that language is actually the smallest percentage of the population. But when we apply it to the workplace, if you think of like how we actually show up in the workplace when we're trying to show people that they're doing a great job, it's like Starbucks gift cards, like literally like MVP plaques, you know what I mean? And it's like if organizations took 2 seconds and actually talked to their people, they'd find out that like words of affirmation, quality time, like
listening to people,
literally like one-on-one conversation with like the phone is down. Like I tell people all the time, you're rock stars. If you want to retain them or your productivity people, take them out to lunch one-on-one. And if they're a fully remote employee, do something that feels personal to them. Like if you notice that they're like a plant person, I had a company do this. They were like, yeah, this one employee, and she just had these like all these plants and stuff on her bookshelf. And she was like our green thumb, like kind of, people would jokingly go to her for like plant advice. He was like, I wanted to really congratulate her on this stellar project that she had worked on for 6 months. And he's like, I found this easy plant app. It's a business. It's like the self-watering plants. And he's like, and I sent her this like gorgeous plant, and the fact that I took the time to like try to find something that she was into instead of just sending a Starbucks gift card where I'm like, I don't even know if you like coffee.
Yeah.
Like I don't even, it's,
And those things just feel performative.
yes. And like, and again, the idea of like, what motivates one person might demotivate another. To your point, you got to talk and listen to your people. If I'm not a words of affirmation person, you sending out an email to the entire organization congratulating me on something or like giving me a shout out in person at the next meeting, I'm like breaking out in hives. If I'm not a words of affirmation person, don't do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing for leaders is they tend to deliver their appreciation in the way that they like to receive it.
It fixes our relationships too.
Oh my God. I tell you, I now look at any relationship in my life the same after reading that book.
Yeah, I know.
So,
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to follow you? You obviously have a ton of expertise. Where can we
sure.
follow you and find you?
Yeah, obviously JobTalkLLC.com is the site. It's where people can find out about services, session types, details, pricing. I'm a huge fan of transparency, so all of that is up there. I can also schedule free intro calls and stuff. And then Instagram, TikTok, it's just JobTalk.LLC.
Great.
Super easy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, again, thank you so much for this. This was
Thanks for
great.
having me.